Milwaukee's 30th Street corridor boasts a rich history of industry, commerce, and community. Over the years, though, manufacturing dwindled, neighbors moved, while abandoned homes and crime slipped into the crevices. But today, hints of revitalization glimmer on the streets. Artists have applied dabs of color and texture to the landscape and even created murals highlighting the faces and stories of neighbors. The group is called In Sight, and it creates public art. WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz steps into the project now as artists take on environmental concerns from illegal dumping to excess stormwater.
These otherworldly tones are coming out of Ted Brusabartis' studio, more precisely, a small computer room off his Bayview kitchen. The audio artist is clipping through 40 hours of sound he collected.
Everything was recorded in that neighborhood. I've done a lot of processing and editing to alter the sounds, making some of them more musical than others.
Brusabartis talked with lots of people in the corridor to learn what was noteworthy.
You will park your car in Ned's parking lot.
That's a pizza joint on 31st and Capitol. Once you arrive, you'll find his sound creation on your car radio, and it will direct you through the corridor's story.
So the windshield becomes the visual, and tuning into 93.9 becomes the audio. And face this very large A.O. Smith facility that's currently being redeveloped. So I'm kind of weaving the stories that I've documented from elderly people, young people.
Brusabartis had to learn about former manufacturing giant A.O. Smith and how it constantly reinvented itself. He also discovered concrete frame structures scattered between the street and sidewalk, filled with native vegetation and rocks and special soil.
Right off of 27th and Capitol is the highest concentration of bioretention planters in the city.
The planters capture rainwater and suck up its pollutants.
And then a pipe then takes the rainwater, takes it maybe half a mile away down to Lincoln Creek and discharges it there.
The purpose of the giant water filters seemed to elude most people in the neighborhood. In fact, the planters seemed to attract discarded Pepsi bottles and Cheeto bags more than anything else. The scene presented an artistic challenge.
Because they seem like a mystery to people that I talk to about them, I thought it would be interesting to create a piece that kind of showcases what they are.
Brusabartis' audio exploration draws on interviews and the split-splatting sounds of water. Sculptor Colin Dixon was asked to take on the same challenge visually.
There's 4 side pieces.
He's cut and bolted large pieces of 4x4s to construct what he calls double arrows.
The idea was pointing out something really interesting in the community, something that maybe passed by.
Dixon says it was a communal decision to coat each double arrow in bold colors.
I worked with the Coalition for Hope. We selected colors that the community found to be really exciting and dynamic.
Ultimately, he must bolt each piece to the concrete planters to visually point out how it handles storm runoff. Christopher Willie's palette are the windows and doors of 12 abandoned homes in the corridor, and he is mid-installation.
Each house, I made something called a planogram, where I know exactly which image is going to go where based on measurements. And what they're doing right now is they're just stapling them up for me.
The background consists of photographed images from a nearby park, but topped with bold silhouettes of animals, the sort trashed properties attract.
A lot of the images come from community meetings. They wanted an interruption of what was going on. There's a lot of squatting or people coming in and stripping these houses of valuable pipes and things like that. But more than not, there's dumping that happens. So the animals are animals that are drawn to the litter.
Shadows of possums, crows, rabbits, and squirrels fill each frame. Willie's suggestion of including rats and cats met with a unanimous veto.
The community actually kind of likes the cats that are around, and then the rats were just like a no-go. They're just too close to home.
A couple of policemen on bicycles are looking on. So is Dave Weber. He works with the nonprofit arm of the Department of City Development. How does Weber think people will react to images of crows and possums popping up on boarded windows and doors? He's confident the temporary art will cultivate interest, yet admits the group must be cautious.
One of the mantras is try to have as little controversy as possible the first time we do this, because obviously we want Insight to be successful, and we'd like to do this in other neighborhoods.
Weber calls the art projects vitally important to summoning public attention to the corridor, and mainly to its positive features, homes that are immaculate and neighbors who watch out for one another. The Insight installation has 6 months to work its magic. Then the art will be removed. Susan Bentz, 89.7 WUWM.
Wisconsin's Ashland and Iron counties share magnificent Lake Superior vistas. They also hold a deposit of much-coveted iron ore. A mining company hopes to dig up the metal stash, estimating the venture would yield more than 2 billion tons of iron and put hundreds of people to work. As state leaders begin considering diverse opinions about a mining operation, the Bad River Band of the Lake Superior tribe of Chippewa Indians holds a unique place in the discussion. Since 1854, the tribe has dwelled along Lake Superior just beyond the proposed mine. WUWM's environmental reporter Susan Bentz visited the reservation and learned about its concerns.
Cyrus Hester, like me, is a visitor here at tribal headquarters. For the past year, he's worked for its natural resource department.
I'm an ecologist by training, but it's amazing how much I've learned in a year. You spend a lot of time at school and you learn a lot of theories and stuff. But when you get to an area where people have lived for generations, take their advice. Listen to what the issues are, because that local knowledge really cannot be replaced and should not be underestimated.
Before we head a couple of miles south to the boat landing, Hester pulls out a map to show how rivers and streams work their way through the Bad River tribal territory.
The light cloudy areas is the high ground. It flows into this deep basin that makes up the entire Ashland, Coggin Sloughs, Bad River Reservation area.
The Bad River watershed encompasses 1,000 square miles and is a major tributary to Lake Superior. If the mine project goes through, it would share that watershed. Right now, Hester describes the land as unengineered.
It means that a lot of the natural processes that developed over eons have remained intact, hydrologically, ecologically, these different systems that still baffle much of our own understanding. Great resource for sturgeon spawning. Bald eagle populations are doing well on the reservation.
The ecologist says that the Bad River Band has not yet seen a mining plan on paper, yet concerns run high that iron extraction would throw off the region's hydrology.
We know that just putting a 4.5-mile long pit in the earth is going to require dewatering of that area so it doesn't fill back up with groundwater. That's a large disruption of the surface and groundwater flow.
Where are you going to sit?
Yeah, I could sit up there.
It takes no time to realize the beauty of the Bad River as we climb aboard a no-frills aluminum motorboat. The skiff slices through wetlands that influence much of the reservation's 125,000 acres. Occasionally, we see an angler's boat hugging the river's edge in pursuit of walleye or perhaps a choice northern. Our navigator, Kenneth Couture, is a noble-faced man, a blue bandana tied around his head, guarding it from the sun and heat of the day. As we course through the river, he says it's at least 20 feet deep.
It's fairly consistent all the way out, yeah. It's a deep river.
Couture's life and that of his ancestors and descendants have been on the reservation and this river. He wonders whether some tribal members take their undeveloped surroundings for granted.
They live here and it's supposed to be like this, That's what our elder legend says. It's supposed to stay the same way it's been generation after generation.
Lake Superior comes into view as Couture nudges the boat into the water's thick plant life, including what's left of this year's wild rice. It blankets stretches of the marsh every year. The younger man next to Couture speaks up. Until now, Jake Derrigan sat quietly.
You see there's some right on that stalk?
Not long ago, this father of 4 young children harvested 80 pounds of rice, enough to feed his family for a year.
It starts spreading like a flower as it ripens.
Both men demonstrate with rhythmic arm motion the age-old method of pressing the rice-laden stalk inward with one cedar stick, then tapping it into the canoe bottom with the other.
Constantly as you're out here, your arms are constantly going.
It's a constant motion.
Derrigan says his dad passed on the art, and now it's time to teach his own young sons. That includes the proper way to prepare the grain. A little salt and a dab of butter, nothing more.
When you're from Bad River, we don't have to doctor our rice. It's the best tasting in the entire planet, hands down. It's an old fact. Why my ancestors settled here and why we settled here.
Derrigan says he worries that a mining operation would affect this natural treasure and the Bad River Band's culture. But his fears run deeper.
I'm concerned about my family and what kind of sicknesses and diseases that's going to bring and their kids. It's going to be ruined for 1,000 years if they do that. It's going to affect everybody.
on a global level. I mean, this is the largest fresh body in the world. I don't understand how they can manipulate some laws and for big business and money, and people who live right here, right next to it, can plainly see what any kind of work upriver from anything upstream, how detrimental it would be.
Tomorrow, during Morning Edition, we'll ask a geologist what is known and unknown about the impacts of mining here. Susan Bentz, 89.7, WUWM.
Today, in honor of Veterans Day, we take you to an out-of-the-way story. WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz discovered a group quietly trying to help homeless veterans find grounding in an urban garden.
Howard Hintertier raises a heavy sheet of plastic to reveal vines loaded with still ripening tomatoes.
I had to figure out some way to trellis them up and actually erect these things over the top.
Very nice.
So we had a little group one weekend and we figured out how to do it, a system that would work.
This makeshift greenhouse came to life on Milwaukee's west side when the weather started turning cold. It's 15 degrees warmer inside. The backyard parcel is tucked behind the home base of the Center for Veterans Issues, or CVI. Its small staff provides social services and other programs designed to help vets come out on the other side of depression and addictions and other obstacles. Hintertier believes the garden can help.
Put a bunch of guys in a room with a psychologist and say, talk about your feelings. It's not going to happen. But if you get out in a garden and you start doing stuff together, before long they start to talk to each other.
He's seen it happen. 72 veterans live right next door in a 3-story complex called Vets Place Central. They've served at various times in various conflicts, but all of the men have one thing in common. They've been homeless. Hintertier says as a few planted and tended peppers and cabbages, gradually, oh so gradually, other vets ventured over to help.
And to me, and if somebody goes down one side of a row with a hoe, and I go down the other side, by the time we get to the other end, we're halfway into their life story. All the elements are good. It's good for me, too. It's been good for Sims.
He's referring to William Sims. Both men are Vietnam War veterans. Sims served in the 101st Airborne Division.
2nd 327, I was in infantry. So I was over there, I think 9 months before I got wounded, and I spent about 4 months in Japan recuperating.
Sims was only 21 when he returned to Milwaukee and calls himself one of the lucky ones. He had a support system. His uncle sent him to help build a house. Sims says he still remembers the rage he felt at the time, but the work and his uncle watching over him began to have a calming effect. Sims says another oasis was his mother's garden.
It was always tranquil, She would always be laughing and joking while we were out there working. And so I always sort of equated that with tranquility.
Sims planted the first garden here in 1995. Just 3 years ago, he dubbed it the Organic Therapy Project. Tending it was a new experience for Quinn. The quiet 41-year-old vet has lived off and on in the transitional housing next door. The Army medic on medical discharge admits this is the first garden he's ever stepped foot in.
If it helps one person, reach another day, I think it's done its job. It helped me. We put in a lot of hours back here.
It's difficult to put in words, but walking into the small, well-tended garden, even at the chilly end of its season, you feel as though the ground is somehow hallowed. Perhaps it's the quiet. Master Gardener, of course William Sims would never accept the title, is determined to expand what's happening here on Wells Street.
Galvanize that camaraderie and something a little bit more bigger than themselves. So it's something that you can see and you can measure.
Sims, along with Howard Wintertier and other volunteers, have their sights on cultivating another acre nearby. They know it can produce not only healthy crops, but also a connection with community and confidence among veterans. Susan Bentz, 89.7, WUWM.